Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Let's talk about ancient Rome and the Punic Wars between Carthage and ancient Rome. So, this is the second Punic War. You'll note from the screen, you have more things here to look at. There's the first Punic War, which we've covered, and now we're going to go into the second Punic War, and we're going to talk about the major players. First off, at the beginning I said there's going to be a blood oath involved. There's going to be a major revenge story here. This is on par with what you might see in Star Wars or something, where you see the two big powers, the two groups of people going against each other, pitting each other against the might of the empire or the might of one group against another. This is a struggle to the death. Carthage lost the first round, and now we're into the second round. And Carthage was severely hurt in that first battle, that first war. They lost a lot. They were put deep into debt by the Romans, and the Romans required them a significant payment back for all of the cost of the war, for all the damages. They were trying to cripple the Carthaginians. The Romans' intent was to make sure that there would be no way that Carthage could rise again, and you can see that they actually did rise again. And so what we're going to do is you're gonna before I go into that, I just want to tell you to go. You can go into these little tabs here and get more of an in-depth. I'm not going to go into the level that this was done in, that I did for this and for the videos. What I am going to do is I'm going to dive into much more kind of detailed about that story of the blood oath and the giant struggle between the two powers. I want to get into that a little bit just real quick, because we I don't want to spend too long on it, but I do want to make sure you understand. So this is where we're at the beginning of the second Punic Wars. You can see my screen here, my mouse. Carthage is in red, and they've taken over these territories here. And what as much as they've been knocked down by the Romans and beaten and forced into paying back a huge amount of money, Carthage did not quit. And in fact, in the image of Hamilcar, who's this guy right here, Hamilcar Barca, he's the father of Hannibal, who we'll be talking about in a minute. He manages to take over the what is today this part of Spain, and he finds a massive amount of precious metals, in which they use to bring back Carthage, to pay back the debt, and then have a whole bunch of money left over to expand their holdings within Spain and make even more money. And Carthage is now once again back on top, despite what the damage was done by the Romans in the war. The Carthaginians are able to come back, and in 218 BC, they pick a fight. Not, they didn't pick the fight. This town over here, Saguntum, picks a fight um, with with the Carthaginians. It's an Italian friend and ally. We don't need to go into the details with that. What we will do, though, is I want to point out we have uh, the the Carthaginians who've taken over all this, and before Hamilcar dies, and throughout before Hamilcar dies, and throughout the conquest of this part of Spain, he makes his son Hannibal swear a blood oath. They pull out the knife, they cut open the hands, they poured it into the flame, and they promised. Uh, Hamilcar made his son promise that he would never be a friend of Rome. He would always eternally be an enemy of Rome. And he then took him on campaign, conquered all these territories up here in Spain. And when he passed away, his son and his son-in-law took over this area. Now they're running the place for Carthage, but they're making a lot of money for Carthage. And this Saguntum picks a fight with them, and the Romans get all upset. Throughout this entire time period, since Hamilcar's death, Hannibal has been planning on the invasion of Italy. He's been planning on the invasion of Roman territory. So he's going to march an army from here all the way over into northern Italy, across the Pyrenees, which run here, and then across the Alps, which run over here. He's going to march all the way to Italy, and he's hoping that he can get the Italians to rise up against him. Now, we've talked about the citizenship of Rome and how these people were treated as second class citizens, or you've read about it in the textbook. Um, One of the things you need to keep in mind is that this was still a problem at this point. And so Hannibal was hoping that when he shows up with his army, the Italians are going to say, wow, look at this guy. He's fighting the Romans. We should get him to help us defeat the Romans so that the Romans have been treating us as second class citizens. They think we're worthless. They think we're nobodies. And he's hoping, Hannibal's hoping that this will change their mind. And we have this guy, we're going to talk about the father and son. This is Scipio Africanus. His dad meets Hannibal at, let's see if I can pull it up. Here it is. At this point right here, as he's coming down from the Alps, he meets his army, and Scipio's father, Publius Cornelius Scipio, he meets Hannibal, and he gets defeated by Hannibal, and he gets wounded pretty severely. And what ends up happening is a series of events that embarrasses Scipio Africanus's father to the point where Scipio Africanus vows that he is going to revenge his father. Now, remember, the start of the story is Hannibal's implementing a revenge that his father made him take a blood oath to do. And now Scipio is now in the midst of a revenge against Hannibal for what Hannibal did to his father. So this is, and so it's to revenge for the damage done to the dad. We see this going on. What's going to happen is, for 17 years almost, Hannibal is going to march up and down the Italian peninsula at will. And there's going to be a general a consul who's going to take over and manage to keep Rome free for for 5 years of that time period. He is Fabius. Fabius is famous. Quintus Fabius Maximus is a famous guy. He was a stutterer. He had problems speaking in public, yet he understood one simple strategy that would work against Hannibal. Hannibal was always the attacker. So Fabius decided, well, if we don't get into a position where he can attack us, then he can attack us. So he kept staying away from Hannibal. I know it sounds weird, right? It sounds like weird, because why? How is that a winning strategy? You're not meeting the enemy, you're not fighting the enemy. Well, the problem with fighting Hannibal is Hannibal always won. And every time, every Roman that went up against him lost to this point. So instead of continuing that, terrible story of continually losing against the guy, Fabian decided to do something called Fabian tactics, which is avoid fighting. And we know that this is a very successful tactic because there was somebody in American history who did the same thing back in 1776, and you know him as George Washington. So here's another connection. We always talk about what's the connection. Why do we care about history or some things? In this case, if Hannibal hadn't existed, Quintus Fabius Maximus would have never existed, and he would have never have been able to implement this strategy and come up with a strategy of avoiding the fight. And if he hadn't come up with a strategy, then there's no saying, maybe somebody else would have done it, but probably not. It's a very unpopular strategy, avoiding a fight. He even got a nickname for it, procrastinator. They call him the Great Procrastinator. They embarrassed him. They humiliated him. Yet he kept Rome free for the time that he was consul. And following these Fabian tactics, he was able to retreat and take all the supplies in the area with him if he could. This worked. This worked when everything else didn't work. And let's talk about one of the times when it didn't work. Um, this battle is the Battle of Cannae. Canaan, some people call it Canaan. This is a Roman loss. This is a Roman disaster. 80,000 Romans against 50,000 Carthaginians. So in this map, you see two different sides. The left-hand side is the beginning. The right-hand side is pretty much the end. You in blue is this is the Carthaginians on this side, and in red is the Romans. The Romans are three red lines. Those are the legions that we're so used to seeing. And of course, this is the cavalry. So the way, in a typical Hannibal, and just as a side note, before I go into this battle, this guy marched his troops one part of this campaign. He marched his troops through a swamp. He managed to get them through this impassable swamp. So that just should tell you it's an impassable swamp. Yet somehow he managed to get his army through it. Well, in the process of getting his army through it, his eye became infected, and it was painful, and it was hurting him, and he couldn't really do anything with it, and it was hurting his ability to command. Now, what does Hannibal do? Some people might put some type of wet towel on it to help calm it down, or some way to deal with the inflammation. Maybe at that time period, get some natural herb to protect it. Not Hannibal. He takes his knife, cuts his eye out. And that's what the man does. The infection's gone. So he loses his eye. Why? Because he didn't have time to let it slow him down. So that's the kind of commander he is. And you can see he has his troops fake like they're falling back. They're all retreating underneath the 80,000, in front of the 80,000 Romans. The Romans are thinking, ha, we got them beat. And all he's doing is creating a half circle. By doing this, the Romans' lines become all messed up. Then the circle starts to enclose, and then the cavalry comes in and seals up the last bit of it. The story goes that the Romans were packed in so tight that they couldn't raise their arms to defend themselves. The battle killed 70-some thousand Romans. This is why Fabius avoided a fight with Hannibal. So that's something to keep in mind. How did Hannibal lose? Eventually, Hannibal loses, obviously. The Romans won, and Hannibal lost. And so what happened um, to Hannibal? This is a picture of Hannibal. There he is. Hannibal eventually makes his way to, he fights his way up and down. Scipio Africanus, the guy I mentioned to you before, the one seeking revenge for the humiliating defeat delivered to his father. Scipio Africanus, manages to convince the Senate to give him an army, and he takes this army. Let's see if I can find the map. I could have sworn I had the map. Oh wait, I know where it is. It's over on the other side. Hold on. He convinces the Roman Senate to give him an army and let him attack Carthage, and that's exactly what he did. We go back to this scene. You can see there's Canaan. He fought that battle there early on, and then eventually all the way over here, Hannibal, fighting up and down. This is his path. This is a good map to show his path to get to Rome. Here's the Pyrenees. Here's the Alps up there. You can just barely see him. And he fought the battles that he won. He won all these battles. All these battles he won. He won them all. Scipio takes his army and crosses over to Carthage and says, "Well, I'm going to take Carthage." Carthage then calls back Hannibal, says, "Hey, get your get your army over here to Rome or to Carthage to defend us against Scipio Africanus. And so in 202 BC, Hannibal gets back to Carthage, fights in the Battle of Zama, which is here, and he loses to Scipio Africanus. Now, I I want to get this into your head. Scipio Africanus is now, succeeding in his revenge, but maybe in a way so did Hannibal. For 17 years, Hannibal came the closest anybody in this time period, or for any time period all the way up to the 400s AD, came to defeating Rome. No one else managed to get this close. To put it clearly, he was at the gates of Rome. And if he had had just the enough time, enough siege equipment, and enough food, and enough troops, he could have taken the city of Rome and probably destroyed it if he wanted to. But he didn't have those because he just, just too much of a logistical supply chain for him. So he didn't win the war. He lost the war at the Battle of Zama. The lesson here is, of course, even a great general, and history has made Hannibal a great general, and that is the truth. Even a great general can lose. So I want to thank you for listening. I want you to take a moment to review this, look at the what happened in the war, who is Hannibal, and please don't hesitate to ask questions.